My name's Steve Chalke and I'm the founder of Stop the Traffic.
Thanks everybody, that's really kind of you. Now, communities are the answer. A few years ago, I had this extraordinary privilege. It's one of the best things I can tell you that's ever happened or will ever happen to me in my entire life. Because I was invited to go and stay on a native Indian reservation. They wanted me to speak to them, and they asked me to speak at this thing. It was just one afternoon. Oh no, it's a couple of afternoons I spoke. But they asked me to stay with them in New Mexico for a whole week. So I lived on a reservation in a teepee and all the rest of it for a whole week. It was absolutely fantastic. And whilst I was there was a wedding. It was this native Indian community. They're part of the Navajo, like the Sioux and the Cheyenne and all the rest of it. The Navajo, a great tribe of native American Indians. So I had this wedding, and one of the things that I do, besides the things that Ruth just said, is I'm actually the leader of a church. I'm a minister. I'm a Baptist minister, so I'm used to doing weddings. You know, I know about weddings. I'm going to marry someone in a couple of weeks' time, actually. I mean, not actually marry them to someone else. So they invited me to go to this wedding. The thing is that the wedding, as I said, I was there for 2 days speaking, and then it was the wedding, and the wedding, believe it or not, lasted for 3 days. That is a long wedding. And it was the most unusual wedding that I've ever attended. It was brilliant, and I'd just like to tell you about one day of the wedding. The first day was the man's day. The second day was, well, the groom's day. The second day was the bridegroom's day, and the third day was the parents' day, and the whole community. But I'd like to tell you about the woman's day, the bride's day, because it was the most fantastic. We were woken up early and we all went down to the village centre, and all of the women in the entire village showed up. All the men were there as well, and the men kind of sat round. So I was given a drink and I was sat on a rock. And then the bride, she stood in the middle of the square and everybody cheered and chanted for her. And then her mother, who I'd had the opportunity of meeting and having a meal with actually, her mother went and stood behind her and held her hand. And then her sisters, she had several sisters, they gathered around and they held hands with the mum and with her. And then endless other women queued up to join in. I was being given a running commentary. There were cousins and there were, there were aunts and there were grandmothers and all sorts of things in this queue. There was even one great-grandmother. She was very short, I remember, and very, very, very elderly. But she queued up as well, right in the centre. And then all the other girls and all the other women in the whole village stood there holding hands with the bride at the front. And then the head man, he stood up, and he had this big horn thing, and he blew it. And at the moment he blew it, it was like a starting gun. He blew this horn, and then all the women started running. It was extraordinary. They all started running together. This coming Sunday, I'm going to run the London Marathon. Do you know? Well, I'm going to stag around it probably, but I'm going to have a go at it. But I'm telling you, there were ladies there that didn't look like they could run anywhere, but they all ran together. And I remember the little great-grandmother right in the middle. She was running. Well, she wasn't actually running. She was lifted off the ground by everybody else, and they rushed forward. But they didn't just run for a little bit. They ran the entire perimeter of the village. Whilst the men sat and watched, all of these women ran, I mean, several kilometres. You know, they ran round this village, and they came back. And I said to the head man who was sat next to me, "What's all this about?" And he said this. He said, "Don't you know?" I said, "No, that's why I've asked." He said this. "This is about marriage." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "It's about marriage. You see that bride? She ran the race, but she had to be connected to her mother, and she had to be connected to her sisters, and she had to be connected to her grandmothers, and she had to be connected to her great-grandmother, and to her cousins, and to their mums, and to every other girl and woman in this village, and they ran together. And did you see how she ran first? But they all carried her, and they ran together. You either run together, or you stumble and you fall. It's a symbol, he said, of the way we view life. I am because we are. We stand together or we're nothing.